how to draw a Basset Hound. So let's go ahead and start with the eyes. I always like to start with the eyes because it just really brings the whole portrait to life once you really actually have the eyes done first. So I want to make sure that you're leaving room for the whites of the eyes. Those are really key for the types of Basset Hounds. They have a lot of white in their eyes and they're very much droopy looking, so you definitely want to emphasize that. Now for the first couple of layers, I like to start left to right just to prevent smudging. And I also try to kind of more work on the smoothness of the actual fur here instead of working on the texture. So I want to make sure that I have the nice low lights and the highlights and kind of emphasize on the rolls that are featured in the Basset Hound itself. Now the ears are definitely a key feature for Basset Hounds, and this one I was really lucky enough to have gotten the opportunity to draw this one where the ear is just flopping out like in action, and it's absolutely adorable. I'm so glad I got to draw this because it was a lot of fun. So for the first couple of layers, you can see that there's a fold happening in the ear. So I really wanted to emphasize that. So on the left hand side, you want to kind of darken it a little bit. And then on the right hand side, keep it lighter and make sure that it's nice and sharp in between. And then for the bottom part is just kind of similar where you just want to make sure that you're drawing the texture and the shading. That's one of the most important parts, is just getting that shading down more so than anything else, and then making it a little bit more smooth over time by applying more layers and by applying lighter colors. When you use a lighter color and burnish over the top of your layers, what that does is it creates a smooth texture over the top and blends everything together. So I really like to use that method quite a lot to make it more of a smoother texture and easier to apply other colored pencils over the top. Now I'm using a slice tool to kind of etch away some details as well. If you're interested in the materials that I'm using, you can also check out my materials list ebook, which is going to be linked below. Now don't forget to leave room for the little white part that is going up into the forehead here, and just working your way around it, making sure that you're emphasizing the bumps, especially in the forehead, and the little wrinkles around the mouth there too, and then kind of underneath the eyes as well. It's also important to make sure that you're applying a variety of colors. So I'm using a lot of different red tones and orange tones and a little bit of pink in there as well. And I'm using a little bit of a light, like a pale blue color. It's really helpful to have that contrast between the cool tones and the warm tones. So applying a cool tone, which is like blues, purples, and greens, and the warm tones, which are reds, orange, and yellow in there, that contrast will really make your portrait pop. So for the nose here, you can definitely see there's a highlight going on at the top, and then the nostrils are just pretty much straight up black. So we're just kind of blending it all together, making sure that the top is nice and shiny. And then around the mouth, there's quite a bit of texture going on. So I'm not really focusing on filling it in nearly as much as I am just trying to get that texture down. If you haven't noticed just yet, I haven't used a lot of actual brown color pencil. I like to kind of use that sparingly because there's a lot more colors that are happening within these more brown animals. So I kind of use that as more of a last resort or for more of the shaded areas. But the most helpful tip that I could give is the more variety of color pencils you use, the more realistic the portrait's going to look. So don't be afraid to try out different colors. So the other ear is kind of curving underneath the dog here. So I'm just kind of drawing what I see more so than anything else. Now, if you're wondering how I got those whiskers, I used that same slice tool and etched those whiskers in before I actually applied all of those colored pencils down. What that does is it leaves that space empty afterwards so you can actually see the details of the whiskers. Because this pet is, kind of at a different angle here, definitely a different pose, it was kind of a challenge just to get the angles and the curves a little bit more accurate, just because I'm not used to it. Such as this paw here, I really had to keep looking at the paw, make sure that I was actually drawing it accurately, because sometimes when you're in the middle of the process, it just doesn't look right. Like right now, it just kind of looks weird, but as you start to build up more layers and start to blend everything out, it starts to come together. So just trust the process and you'll start to see better results the more you practice. It's also super important to make sure that your pencil is nice and sharp when it comes to drawing smaller areas. It just really helps to get in those details a little bit better, especially if you have a piece of paper that has more tooth to it. So if it has more bumpy texture, definitely want to keep a sharper pencil. I didn't draw too much detail for the white area, just kind of really focused on the shading more than anything else, using some warm grays and a little bit of some pink tones. It's really important. You want to make sure you have a little bit of some warmer pink tone kind of colors. That way the portrait looks a little bit more alive. The dog looks an actual alive animal, because all alive animals have a little bit of a fleshy tone to them. It just makes them look like it just makes them look a little bit more realistic. And then for the rest of the body, there wasn't too much to it. It's just really a matter of getting down the colors and blending it all together and making sure that the part where it is red has a little bit more shading to it, and then the part where it's more white, it's just nice and blended and very smooth, and emphasize that that is actually the rest of the part of the body. So continuing on to the material part. Now, I have not really drawn a whole lot of material in the past, so this was definitely a challenge for me, but it's all about just getting those first couple layers down and then getting that texture in. Super important. That pattern right there is just key to making it look more realistic overall. So I noticed that as I started to kind of work and build up those layers. You want to definitely make sure that your first couple of layers are pretty strong and emphasized, and then you can go back over with more details using darker color pencils. But if you're struggling with material, I suggest probably practicing that separately on a different piece of paper and just kind of figure out your way around it and see what works and what doesn't work. For me, just getting those curves, that's really what helped me overall, because it definitely does not look exactly like the actual blanket, but making sure you have highlights, in the top parts of the curve, and then low lights, so like darker areas and more of the creases. That really helped me overall. And because of this kind of pattern here, it definitely took a little bit longer than I anticipated to get this pattern down. But if it's just more of like a smooth blanket, it should definitely be a lot easier to practice. But the most important thing when it comes to drawing something that's separate from the animal is making sure that the difference between the animal and the other piece is nice and sharp in between. So like the top of the blanket here, make it nice and sharp there. You definitely want it to look like it's not necessarily blending into the animal. So I'm almost done here. I really hope that this video was helpful. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, or if you thought that this one was really helpful. And if you are wanting to learn to draw, or if you're just curious about the materials I'm using, check out all the links below. I have everything listed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.